prominent. But I think of him as loving that song, because he didn't want to be fenced in, right? And he loved the outdoors. Anyway, I'm glad that I opened you to another song.
Did he have a favorite film?
Did he have a favorite film? I can't remember if he had a favorite film. You know, his father, as you know, ran 3 studios at once, which was, I don't think anybody but his father ran 3 studios at once. I don't know if he had a favorite film. We did watch lots of movies, but probably, you know, what is the famous, the cowboy films? Oh, there's so many cowboy, Strong.
John Wayne.
Not John Wayne, before John Wayne.
Artie Murphy.
You know who I'm talking, he's really handsome. Enough of that. Anyway.
Historical figure.
Gary Cooper.
Gary Cooper. Gary Cooper. Thank you. I knew you guys were sweet. I am about this.
Historical figure.
Historical figure. Well, he had a lot of books about the Civil War. So if you walked into his office, he was very, very big on the Civil War. In fact, one of our horses was named Shiloh. And he was very interested and paid a lot of attention to the Civil War. And we were quizzed, you know, at night, we were always quizzed about current events, and we were quizzed about historical figures. And we were also quizzed, which I'm going to now quiz you on, where was the Battle of Bunker Hill fought?
Boston.
Which hill? What hill was the Battle of Bunker Hill fought on? Breed's Hill. I know. They always get it mixed up, just so you know.
What is it?
Breed's Hill. Breed's Hill is next to Bunker Hill. And so the historians kind of got it mixed up, and they were supposed to get it mixed up on purpose because the revolutionaries wanted the British to go up Bunker Hill because Breed's Hill was behind it and they could get them and win. Anyway, it's just a funny, it's just, why do I remember it? Because it's such a ridiculous thing to have to remember. That's why. Anyway.
Depends civil rights activity as Attorney General versus civil rights activity after Attorney General and as a senator. Civil rights as an Attorney General.
Well, as an Attorney General, I'm going to tell you a story that I bet you guys don't know about what he did. So, all of you are familiar with the university, getting James Meredith into the University of Mississippi in 1962, right? That's well known. You know, 2 people died. I'm going to tell you 2 parts of it. One part of it you probably don't know. One, there were 2 people died, 250 people were injured. And the gang that was against the integration of the University of Mississippi was led by one of William Faulkner's nephews. And the National Guard was led by another of William Faulkner's nephews. And I think that's telling because it just shows, as the Civil War was often between brothers and cousins, so was the integration of the University of Mississippi. Okay? So I think that's an interesting. Now I'm going to tell you a story, and a film has been made about this, this story, so you can watch the film, which is much better than my storytelling, okay? So just bear with me. So during that University of Mississippi, Governor Ross, Barney Ross, was the governor, and he and John Kennedy and Robert Kennedy talked about 24 times during this, and because John Kennedy and Robert Kennedy obviously wanted this to be peaceful, and they went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and John Kennedy recorded those conversations, as he recorded many conversations, in the hopes, I believe, that he could, when he wrote his memoirs, he would have a good recording. And I just read a fabulous book, which has nothing to do with our, no, it has something to do with our conversation today, about the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was recorded. It's a 180-page book. It's a fascinating book about the arguments that they had over those 10 days and how people changed their minds back and forth, which I found. I read it in a week. It was so interesting. Anyway, back to Mississippi. So, James Meredith, and the rule in Mississippi at that time was the governor couldn't succeed himself. So, this is 4 years later, and Governor Ross is now running for governor again. And somebody knew about the recordings, and they wanted everybody in Mississippi to hear about what was in those recordings. In those recordings were Governor Ross saying certain things that he would not want to got out. But it would be very difficult to figure out how anybody would hear what Governor Ross was actually saying to John Kennedy. So they thought the best way to have those conversations to get out is if Robert Kennedy went to Ole Miss and gave a speech. And somebody would ask him the questions, and then he would tell what happened. But Ole Miss had a rule that he could only speak if it was an approved speaker. So the first thing they had to do is figure out how he could be approved. So a group at the law school came up with a long list, developed the speakers group, and put together a long list of speakers, most of whom were like members of the Ku Klux Klan and all those kind of groups, very right-wing, and put Robert Kennedy's name way down at the list, bottom of the list, so nobody would ever get that far down to approve it. You get my drift? So the dean approved it, just, you know, big deal. So Robert Kennedy got invited, and he said yes. And all hell broke out. And when Ole Miss realized, the dean, the head of this, the president of the school, realized that Robert Kennedy was invited, and the Board of Regents realized he got invited, and there was all these newspapers. You can't invite him. He's a traitor. He's terrible. He's worse than his brother. Lee Harvey Oswald got the wrong guy. You got what was happening. So the president of the university said to the law school head, "You have to disinvite him." And the law school dean said, "No, I can't disinvite him. I'll fire him, but I'm not going to disinvite him." So they then went to the Board of Regents, and they were going to take a vote as to whether to disinvite him. And one of the arguments that the law school dean made was, if you disinvite him, the NCAA will not allow you to play football. He was making up that argument, but he thought it would be compelling. So it was a 5-4 vote to allow Robert Kennedy to speak, okay? Because he was anathema in Oxford, Mississippi. So he came down to speak, and originally, if you were going to speak at the law school, it would be a room probably like this, if small. But so many people said yes, it was moved to the newly built basketball stadium, the whole stadium, completely packed. And my father very wisely got my mother to go with him, so that when they walked in, he was holding her hand. And that make everybody give him a standing ovation because they thought it was so sweet. Oh my God, he has a wife. He's not the devil incarnate. And before the speech, they had a lunch for him, and after the lunch, he went to all the people who served the lunch, all the black servers, and thanked them. And they had never been thanked before. It was the first time in the history that they had ever been thanked. Now, they had worked out the deal with the students who had arranged this, that Daddy would just give a nice speech about how people have different values, and those values usually come from where you're born, and you can't judge people based on what they do or say, because people come up with values based on where they're born, which is true. If you had been born in Oxford, Mississippi in 1945, 55, you would have one value. If you were born in Minneapolis or Boston, you might have different values. You get my drift. We all get our drift. So that's the kind of speech he gave, and we all have work to do, and these are issues that people all around the world need to face. It was a very nice speech, lovely speech. He got a standing ovation at the end of the speech. Okay, nobody can believe Robert Kennedy is getting a standing ovation. What he didn't want to do is, in the speech, tell what Governor Ross had said. So, the first question is, how was your conversation with Governor Ross? It was okay. Well, what did he actually say? Well, he said a number of things. Well, Senator, could you give us greater detail as to what Governor Ross said? And the detail was this. Governor Ross had said, well, could you get your people to point, 7 of your people, no, could you get 30 of your National Guard to come up and point guns at me? And my father said, no, I am not going to get 30 of the National Guard to point guns at you. He said, well, how about getting 7 of them, and they could just point it at my head? And my father said, no, I am not going to get 7 of the National Guard to point guns at your head. He said, well, how about if they just pointed at all my staff? And do you see that you're laughing? Well, the whole audience is in uproar, laughing that Barney Ross is negotiating how, with the President of the United States, how the National Guard is going to point guns at his head so they can get, and then he's describing, and so that we could get a picture of that on the front page. Do you understand? So everybody in the audience is laughing because they cannot believe that Barney Ross, the governor, is now negotiating with the President of the United States to get guns pointed at him so he can get his picture on the front page so it looks like he's forced to take pictures. Thank you for laughing. None of the rest of you are laughing. Clearly, I'm not telling this in a very good way. But if you watch the movie, everybody laughs. Okay, you get my drift? Anyway, so Daddy ends with the story. He gets a long standing ovation. Nobody in Oxford, Mississippi, or anywhere in Mississippi can believe that Bobby Kennedy, the devil, gets a 20-minute standing ovation. He leaves. And as you can guess, Barney Ross does not get elected governor of the University of Mississippi. So I advise you to go see that movie. And it's a wonderful story for today when, as you know, there's this whole thing about we're not going to have somebody we disagree with come and speak to us. And obviously, a lot of people didn't want to have my father's come and speak at the University of Mississippi. And he's turned the whole thing around by coming and speaking and showing that if you tell what's the truth, it's not a bad idea. I thought you'd like that story.